Kwe, Upsaladik. Hi, welcome. My name is Neil Silcox. I'm the faculty excellence developer here at the Maple League of Universities. I'm joining you today from a foggy Kchbuktuk in unceded Mi'kma'ki. It's also called Halifax. We have people joining us today from all across Turtle Island, all over the world. If you care to drop into the chat where you're joining from today, I would love to hear it. I'm really excited to welcome you to Nonviolent Communication, a primer with Amy Abe. Amy is an award-winning educator, curriculum writer, and change agent who has been recognized by the STLHE, SciCan, and many others for her educational leadership in adult and social justice education. She spent the last 20 years unsettling language and settlement education and supporting learners, faculty, and administrators in anti-racism, decolonization, and social justice efforts. Amy currently serves as the Special Advisor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Bishop's University. Please join me in welcoming Amy Abe. Take it away, Amy.
Thank you, Neil, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are, to all of the folks that I can see in the chat box. Thank you for coming today. I just want to do a quick check. Can you hear me okay? I'm not sure. And is my camera on? I can't even see myself. I don't know.
Everything is good.
It's very disconcerting. Okay. I also just want to warn you, I am overcoming a bit of a cold, and so I will promise to pop off my microphone if the urge to cough or sneeze on you overtakes me today. All right, well, keeping our time and your time in mind, I'm going to share my screen with you and get the Nonviolent Communication party started. So this is Nonviolent Communication, and I do call it a primer, largely because this is a workshop that I often give over a series of several days. There's a lot to learn and to practice and to unpack, and I can guarantee you we are going to only be skimming the surface today. But I hope it's enough to get your feet wet and to get interested, and hopefully you'll be able to take the next steps. I'll also be sharing with Neil a module that was created. It's the workshop module that I use when I give this workshop. It's a little workbook. It's got activities and more in-depth information, and I'm very happy to share it with you so that you can use it in your own way and for whatever learning purposes that you have. So just to reintroduce myself, I am Amy Abe. This is me and my alpaca friend from a week ago. And I just thought if anybody needed a little bit of a smile today, you might enjoy meeting my alpaca friend. As Neil said, I am an educator. I've had a passion for pedagogy and curriculum, especially in social justice type of work, which is what I've been doing for the last 20 years. I was out in Amiskwichiwaskahigan Treaty 6 territory, Edmonton, for almost the last 20 years, but I'm happy to be joining you today from the traditional territories of the Wabanaki people. Now, here at Bishop's, we acknowledge in our land acknowledgement that this is unceded territory, but a lot of our reflections and discussions lately have been even around the use of the word unceded, which is a deeply colonial idea that, land can be taken or given or relinquished or ceded. Land ownership is a colonial idea. And so we've been having more discussions lately, acknowledging that we are on land that is settled without treaty and without relationship. And relationship is really important to me, and it's a vital component of nonviolent communication, which is why I raise it today. And then hopefully this will bring you some strategies and some tools for you to reflect on your relationships in spaces of conflict. I'm going to invite us today to reflect on a recent conflict that you may have had. I'd like you to envision one. It could be with a friend or a colleague or a coworker. Neil, could I ask you to pop up my first poll question? I'd like you to think about a recent conflict, and on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your willingness to engage in conflict? Are you very conflict avoidant? Do you try to avoid it? Or do you feel confident to engage in conflict? Don't worry, these are not scientific answers. Just go with your gut. I won't be publishing these. Just trying to get a sense of the room here today. Some people feeling very confident to engage. Some people more on the conflict avoidance side. Oh, I shouldn't have given a 3. I dislike the fence answer. I should have given you a more definitive spectrum to choose from. When I do workshops, I sometimes remove the fence answer. Okay, it looks like some people feel pretty confident to engage, which is great. We have about 30% sitting on the fence. Oof, I'll take out the fence answer next time. And we do have quite a few people who are conflict avoidant, and that's understandable. Conflicts are often framed, at least in Western cultures, as adversarial, and I can understand why people might want to try to avoid them. All right, next question, Neil. Let me see if I can understand all y'all a little bit better here. Thinking again of conflict. Next poll question. I'd like you to think about a recent conflict you had with somebody, and could you just share with us who that conflict was with? With nonviolent communication, the relationship with the person that you're in conflict with is important. We don't really use nonviolent communication strategies with relationships that are unimportant to us. It's really more of a strategy to communicate with people whose working relationships or our personal relationships are important to us. All right, conflicts with family members, supervisors, okay, some with friends. Ooh, some people getting into conflicts with strangers. Grocery store battles on the street. All right. So I'm looking at colleagues. Some people are having conflicts with colleagues, family members, friends. I'm going to assume that in most of these cases, the relationship that you have with that person is probably a valuable relationship to you. It's either a family member where you would want to sustain good relationships, or a colleague where if you want to be able to work together, the relationship that you have with that person is important. And if that's the case, then nonviolent communication might be a really good communication strategy for you. It's not really a useful strategy if you don't care about the relationship that you have with the person in the conflict. For example, a stranger or an acquaintance, you might not care about having good relationship with that person after a conflict, or you might, we'll see. And I think I've got one more question here for you in my poll. I can't remember how many questions I asked today.
This is the
Oh, there
last
we
one.
go. So thank you. The memory of a sieve here. So thinking of that same conflict, how was the relationship after that conflict? Was it better? Did you come out of it transformed and in a stronger place? Or did things come out, are things still a little awkward? Or worse, are they damaged, or is the relationship done? Is it irreparably damaged? Maybe for those of you who answered stranger, this might not be a possible question to answer. I don't know, I haven't seen them again. Okay, so not a lot of people indicating that the relationship is better than before. Some are saying all is well, this is okay, but others are like, it's okay, it's awkward, things aren't so great, and some people even saying like the relationship is done. Okay, thank you for sharing this with me. And this is important to understand about nonviolent communication. It is a strategy for engaging in conflict with people whose relationships are important to us. So those are personal relationships or professional ones, where you would want to come out of that conflict solid, or even better, you want the relationship to be transformed and stronger than before. So why nonviolent conflict as a communication strategy? There's a lot of different communication strategies out there. As an equity, diversity, inclusion, social justice-y type person, there's a lot of reasons that I introduce nonviolent communication as one of the many ways that I engage with folks. Generally speaking, conflict in North America is often framed as adversarial. Many of you said that you avoided conflict. I can only imagine why, but there's winners and there's losers. Our harassment or conflict policies and processes often pit people against each other, where there's a winner and a loser. And oftentimes those processes are a form of harm and conflict in and of themselves. And if you think about our university conflict and harassment type policies and the processes we go through, they're based not so loosely on like litigious processes, legal processes, and how we handle things in court. And so the intended outcome of even mediation isn't a transformed or healed relationship. Even mediation can create more harm than good, because compromise isn't always necessarily a great way to end a conflict, especially in the EDI world, where, well, who are we trying to make comfortable? Whose comfort and needs are we prioritizing? And how do we create space for growth and learning and transformation? So that is really why I like nonviolent communication, because it does focus on the space of conflict as a space of growth and transformation and even healing. Nihid Nenchi, for those of you out west are familiar with the former mayor of Calgary, he visited bishops not too long ago, and he did mention in his speech and his address that times of tension are often followed by times of transcendence and creation. And of course, Frederick Douglass, the very famous abolitionist, talks about struggle as being necessary for growth and change. And this is what nonviolent communication acknowledges, is that we need to develop conflict literacy and fluency, and to reframe conflict not as an adversarial space or a combatant space, but one where we can enter and grow before it becomes a physical form of violence. And as I said, in EDI work, to choose to avoid conflict is often the choice to say that inequity, exclusion, and injustice are the price that we are willing to pay for harmony. And for me, this is problematic. So nonviolent communication really does seek to create a very different space of engagement, and this is what I hope to walk you through today. But before we start, I just want to let you know what nonviolent communication is not, just so that we're all on the same page. It's not helpful for interrupting microaggressions, macroaggressions, explicit bigotry, harm, and physical violence. If your conflict has reached that state, then nonviolent communication is not the strategy that's going to be helpful for you. It is not helpful for teaching or educating others. If you want to call somebody in, or they need to be educated, or you want to address their ignorance, something like this is not what nonviolent communication does. It is also not a tool for gaslighting, even though I have seen lots of people manipulate nonviolent communication strategies as a way to gaslight others. I'm going to caution you to be very careful. Please do not use these strategies to gaslight others. And it is absolutely not a tool for mediation. And that's because nonviolent communication focuses 100% on you, your communication, your actions, your behaviors, and your ability to navigate conflictual spaces, and your contributions to the conflict and how you understand others, how you listen, all of these things. So nonviolent communication I like because it's a starting point for looking at yourself and your own ways of engaging and communicating within conflict. It is not about other people in the conflict in terms of trying to change their behaviors, or to change their understanding, or to change their communication. This is not the goal of nonviolent communication. So we're here to focus on you today, all y'all. So it'll help us express your feelings and your needs in a conflictual space. Now, it can also help you receive feedback and understand others in a conflictual space, but we simply don't have time for that today, unfortunately. But as I said, I will be sending Neil that module, and he can share that with everybody who is present today, because it is a very in-depth and really effective communication process. But again, we're short on time. Now, nonviolent communication identifies 5 forms of obstruction. I, over time, have come to see the obstructions as 4. There are actually, in my mind, 4 kinds of obstruction. Comparison and judgment are really similar to me, and I'll share a little bit about why that is coming up. But obstructions to good communication in a conflictual space, the biggest one would be judgment or comparison. We impose our judgments or our expectations on others, and this will obstruct our ability to empathize, to create new understandings, and to transform and learn within the space. The desire for punishment is is another obstruction, which seems pretty obvious, but it's actually quite subtle how it might appear when we engage in conflict. Defending or denying our actions or our own responsibility is another form of obstruction, and then making demands instead of expressing a request within the conflictual space. So we're going to take a look at obstruction first. It's actually a little bit easier to stop doing these things than it might be to actually do some of the steps of nonviolent communication. It all takes practice. We're going to take a quick look at judgment. Now, many of you might be familiar with the brain and the idea that we respond to new information instinctively and emotionally first. We're just wired this way. We receive and process and interpret information based on unconscious or implicit biases. We have an emotional response, and then eventually it makes the information makes its way to the reasoning and critical center of the brain. But by then, we've already made sense of information in a very instinctual and emotional kind of way. And in a lot of cases, our implicit biases might be driving the proverbial train in this case. I often use Jurassic Park as a metaphor for what's happening when judgments are formed. Forgive me, I'm a child of, I grew up with a lot of media and pop culture from the 90s, so I hope some of you are cool with this reference. But in Jurassic Park, when they were making the dinosaurs, they had an incomplete strand of dinosaur DNA. And in order to complete the dino DNA, they had to fill in the gaps. They had to fill in and complete the missing information with what was available now, which in this case happened to be frog DNA. So they filled in the incomplete DNA strand, they filled in the incomplete story with frog DNA, and now we have like 6 movies where like the dinosaurs all eat people. Now, maybe this is a bit of a heavy-handed metaphor, but bear with me. We do the same when it comes to incomplete stories or incomplete information. We fill in the gaps with the information that we already have available to us, our experiences, our own worldviews, what we've learned, or even our biases. We fill in the missing information, the incomplete story, with our own information. And this is where we decide if something good, bad, respectful, not respectful, safe, unsafe. So this is where our judgments come from. We fill in that incomplete information with frog DNA, aka our own judgments and experiences. And this contributes to even more conflict and misunderstanding in the conflictual space. Comparisons are based on judgment. We compare our expectations of what somebody should be doing versus what they are doing, and we judge them for it. How you're handling this situation is good based on my expectations versus bad. So judgment gets in the way of entering a conflictual space and creating understanding or creating new understanding. The other forms of obstruction that nonviolent communication likes to tell us are punishment. And I'm sure you've been in a place, as have I, where you felt like, oh, okay, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to teach you a lesson, that desire for punishment. I'm going to make an example out of you. I'm going to throw the book at you. That frustration, I don't know about you, but maybe when you're marking a paper and you're like, man, this person has plagiarized for like the 5th time. Or maybe it's the first time, but you're just so exhausted, and your response to that conflict and your frustration is the desire to punish. Defense and denial is another form of obstruction where you justify your behavior or your decisions with a policy or a law, or the desire to win. And we know in the social justice world that not all laws or policies or rules are equitable, fair, or just. In fact, some policies, rules, and procedures perpetuate inequity and harm. And within nonviolent communication, using the rules as an excuse to defend or deny your actions is a kind of obstruction. We cannot engage in a conflictual space to transform or heal a relationship if we're defending our actions. Defense, defense, defense. And another form of obstruction is that we express our needs as a demand or as an ultimatum. And I'll show you a couple of ways that we do this. English is an insidious little language sometimes, where it sounds like we're doing one thing, but really we're doing another. I'd like you to use the chat box. I'd like you to weigh in on whether you think that this statement is a form of judgment, punishment, defense, or denial, A, B, C, or D. If somebody says, well, that's inappropriate, what kind of obstruction is happening here? And please feel free to pop your answers in the chat box. A lot of people are popping in some A's, yeah. A and C, mostly C. Yeah, it could be C, right? If you're defending something against a policy that defines what is appropriate or inappropriate. A lot of A, because what is appropriate or not is highly subjective. Yeah, it depends on who's speaking, 100%. I know I didn't give a lot of context here, all y'all, but yes, there's a lot of A happening here, and it could be defense. So if you perhaps you have a policy or a procedure that describes what is appropriate or inappropriate, perhaps you're defending something, but it is absolutely steeped in judgment. And there's no room here anymore for growth or empathy or new understandings if this is what we're bringing to the table. How about this one? There are some things you have to do whether you like it or not. What kind of obstruction are we looking at here, friends? It's a pop quiz, I apologize. Yeah, it could be a little bit of B. Some people threw in a B. It sounds very punishing. It could be, oh, look at you and your little subtle, yeah, this is a very indirect demand for sure. And it might be C. Some of you popped in a C. It could be that somebody here is trying to point to a rule or an unwritten rule, right? Like the unwritten societal rule. This is what you just have to do it. You have to suck it up and do it. So this could be punitive. Somebody's trying to punish you. Somebody could be trying to defend something, or this could be an indirect demand depending on your sociocultural pragmatics. Absolutely. And again, you can see here, this is not a space of growth. In this particular communication. How about this one here? It's high time my contributions were appreciated. I deserve a raise. Uh-oh, I lost the chat box. Oh, here we go. Here we go. It's high time my contributions were appreciated. A lot of people throwing in a little bit of, yeah, it's a little bit of, somebody's giving me multiple answers. Yeah, there's a little bit of judgment comparison here, right? So, and there's a little bit of demand going on here, right? I have decided that I am unappreciated. That's a judgment piece, and I'm also making demand. I deserve a raise. Maybe this person has a need. They want to feel appreciated, but maybe they need a raise. Maybe they want their contributions to be better compensated, but they're not communicating that well here, and they may be creating more animosity and antagonism than they are expressing their feelings and their needs. He procrastinates. Procrastination. Oh, look at y'all. This is a judgment, right? Our expectations about how we prioritize our tasks and our time. That's an evaluation of somebody's behavior. It's judgment, dirty judgment. I don't have a choice. Our academic policy says I have to give you a 0. How many times have we said this, my friends, my academic friends here, teachers in the room? This is a defense. This is a defense and a little bit punishment. Yeah, it could be a punishment, depends on the tone, yeah? But for sure, this is a defense. Well, my hands are tied. I have to give you the 0. There's nothing I can do. You should be following up with the client, not standing around chit-chatting. This one's taken directly from a nursing home where I was giving some intercultural training a few years ago. There's a lot in this one. There's judgment for sure, demand for sure, a little bit of a comparison. I am comparing your behavior maybe against other folks. So there's judgment and demand intermingled here, a little bit of a judgy demand milkshake. Absolutely. You don't give me as many opportunities to manage projects. Yeah, a little bit of a judgment, a little bit of a demand. There's also a little bit of comparison happening here, comparing the opportunities that I receive against other people. So maybe this person has a need, they want to take on more responsibility, but that's not what's being communicated here. Absolutely. I'll stop. You guys you've got it. So you can see here the difference between these different obstructions. Here's one too, by the way. You're making me feel guilty. That one's by the way, that's a C. That's a defense or a denial. So you can see that these different things that I'm sure we've all said in some form or another can create less space to navigate or engage in the conflict. In fact, it may make the conflict even worse. And they do obstruct the room that we have to transform or to understand others. So nonviolent communication wants us to be cognizant of those obstructions and those barriers, but also offers 4 steps in communicating within the conflictual space. Now, the first step I've sort of lumped together, the first 2 steps I've kind of popped together, and it's asking you to suspend judgment, which actually is a lot tougher than it seems, where you're asked to express your feeling, not a judgment, and to observe the other person's behavior or to describe the behavior in relationship to the feeling. These 2 steps are brutally hard and so worth practicing and digging into. And we're going to do that together in just a minute. So expressing our feeling, but not a judgment, and relating that feeling or connecting that feeling to an objective, observable behavior, not a characterization or interpretation of a behavior, but an objective, observable behavior. The third step in nonviolent communication is to describe your need, not a demand, and then to make a request. And the tricky part with NVC, with nonviolent communication as well, is that you have to be prepared to hear no to your request, but that's okay. So these are the 4 steps, and I'm going to walk you through them as best I can in the time that I have. So expressing our feelings can be really tricky because, again, English is not a great language for expressing feelings. We actually express a lot of judgment in a way that sounds like we are expressing our feelings. So we're going to do a little practice today. Do all y'all have access to your reactions? Can you find your cute little reaction buttons there, for the heart emoji or the clapping hands emoji? I'm hoping you can, because I'm going to call out, yeah, thank you, Neil. It's in the bar at the bottom of the Zoom window, which I do not have access to when I'm sharing my screen, so I can really talk to you. But I'm gonna say a word to you. I'll even type it in the chat box. I'll say or type that word, and I'd like you to use your reaction to tell me, is the word that I have given you, is it a feeling or emotion, or is it an expression of judgment? Are we ready? All right, word number 1, or phrase number 1. Here we go. Maybe a softball. I'm angry. Is this an expression of feeling or is it a judgment? Give me the heart emoji if you think it's a feeling. Give me the clapping hands emoji if you think that it is a judgment, or the reaction, or whatever you like there. Oh, look at all the cute little, okay, I'm trying to see the reactions. It's hard. Multiple screens here. I'm angry. Emotion or judgment? Don't worry, I'm not grading your answers, I promise. I have no opportunity to grade things in my new role. Does anybody want to pop on the chat box and let me know why you chose the answer you did? Let's say somebody who chose feeling or emotion. Tell me why you chose, for those of you who chose feeling or emotion, what was the rationale behind your choice? I promise not to grade you. I feel angry is not a judgment of another person. Yeah, it's it's personal. It's an I statement. Okay. Hang on to that thought for a second there, Mark Hamilton. We're going to come back to that. Feeling, we're sharing what you're initially experiencing. Sure, it's a description of your emotion. Statement describing something about themselves. They're telling how I feel. Angry is a feeling. Sure. Have you seen that movie Inside Out? If you haven't, I encourage it. Anger is absolutely a feeling. Good. That was a little bit of a softball there, friends, but yes, anger is absolutely, it's a feeling, it's a core feeling, in fact. Well done. How about this one? I'll type it in the chat box so you can read it and you can hear me. How about this one, friends? I feel disrespected. I feel disrespected. Shazia, yes, I am angry equals I feel angry. Absolutely, yes. And this is why the English language is going to be tricky. Ava, Ava Becker says, tough, it feels like both. Yeah, it does, but think of it now. English language is an insidious language. It's going to trick us here. I feel disrespected. Ooh, I feel disrespected. Oh, I see Mark Hamilton's back with clapping hands. Clapping hands, he says judgment. All right, tell me about the folks who say judgment. Yeah, Ava says it starts with I feel, but the disrespected part implies judgment of someone else. It's a judgment. I'm assuming the other person's intention. I don't know that. There we go. Okay. Yes, friends. Judgment. This is a judgment. I feel disrespected. This is where English gets tricky. We're using words like I and feel, but disrespected is a beautiful passive verb in this case. What we're really saying is you disrespected me. And this is an evaluation or an interpretation or a judgment of somebody else's behavior. And as we know, or I hope we know, respect looks and is interpreted very differently, person to person, culture to culture. So this is somebody using the frog DNA to fill in the incomplete story. We've interpreted the behavior or the words or the tone as disrespectful. Yeah, there we go. It's assuming somebody else's intention. It's interpreting somebody else's behavior. So even though we have those tricksy words, I feel, disrespected is not actually a feeling. I'll give you another one. I feel ignored. I feel ignored. I feel misunderstood. There we go. We got some hands, clapping hands coming. I see them. I see the clapping hands. Any hearts on this one? I can't see everybody's responses. I do apologize. Maybe my idea to use the emojis was not so great. I can't see everyone. We have a lot of hands. All right. Tell me about ignored. Same grammatical construction. Absolutely. We still have I feel. How about this word ignored? Yeah, it's assuming somebody else, it's actually interpreting somebody else's behavior. Really what we're saying is you are ignoring me, and it's creating a characterization or an interpretation of the behavior, right? So disrespected, if we go backwards a little bit to disrespected, really that feeling, that core feeling is probably a combination of hurt or anger or something like this. Shastia, yeah, I taught English as a second language. One of my fields is in TESOL, and yeah, I usually begin most of my classes with, just so you know, English is a horrible, insidious little language, just to motivate the people. Yeah, ignored is not an emotion, right? It is a roundabout way, Mark, absolutely. And yet we're using language that implies feeling, right? I feel unappreciated. I feel ignored. I feel triggered. Triggered, by the way, not an emotion. Trigger is a verb, right? The emotion is anxious or fearful or angry, right? So I speak fluent passive aggressive. Yeah, a lot of us do, and we don't realize that we're doing it. Good to know. Yeah, and English brilliant to express feelings in detail. I'm happy to hear that. I know that English can be clearer than some languages. I know that it can be muddier than others. And our grammar constructions give us a lot of flexibility in how we express ourselves. Portuguese. I have not learned Portuguese. I'll have to, I would love to learn more about that later, the muddiness. And in English, for sure, I know that the availability of the vocabulary and all of our grammar constructions gives us a lot of space to even accidentally be characterizing, to be judging someone, rather than expressing how we actually feel. And that's a soft skill, being in touch with what is your actual feeling and expressing it in a language that is not ascribing judgment to somebody else's behavior. One of the handouts that I will be sharing with you comes directly from the folks who, the Nonviolent Communication crowd, where they do have an inventory of feelings that are actually feelings, and they actually do give examples of words that sound like feelings in English, but are not. And the module handouts and activities that I'll be sending as well provide a few more examples and activities that you can do on your own or with some friends or colleagues to actually dig into that. But this is the hardest part for some people, is to be in touch with what you're actually feeling and naming it without bringing in judgment into the way that you are expressing yourselves. I also have a handout that a student here at Bishop's University actually shared. She's a psychology major, and it's a way for people who are not normally in touch with their own emotions to become more conscious of them and become more adept at naming them. So I've added her handout to the arsenal of handouts that I like to share with people in case that's something you need to practice. I do enjoy a good community of practice. Moving forward, friends, just to give you a couple of examples as well, when we describe somebody else's behavior, it's also really easy to describe that in a way that is actually judgment versus observation. And just a couple of examples: the judgment, you are aggressive, versus you made a request more directly than I expected. For example, the judgment, you're always busy, you're never around when I need you, which is a judgment piece, versus you've declined the last 3 meeting requests I sent and weren't at your desk, you know, at our scheduled meeting, which sounds really cold in this context, but I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of what a judgment could look like versus an objective, observable behavior. He's a horrific writer. Versus his report contained a number of grammatical errors and wasn't formatted with the company template. So when we describe somebody else's behavior in relationship to our feelings, it's really easy to slip into judgment. And it takes a little bit more of a conscious critical effort for us to suspend our judgment and to describe our feeling or to describe somebody else's behavior in a way that isn't loaded with frog DNA, that isn't loaded with the incomplete pieces of the story filled in with our own interpretations and assumptions of what's happening. This one I had fun with when I was working on some intercultural stuff out west. Immigrants don't take care of their property versus I haven't seen our neighbors mow their lawn in a week. Also racism, but we're not going to deal with that here today. So you can see the judgment piece versus the observable behavior. Both are very different. One is very loaded, and one creates a better space for navigating the conflict, for communicating, and for hopefully transforming the relationship. Again, nonviolent communication is about sustaining or healing relationships. Needs are often expressed in a way that sounds like a demand or is also expressing judgment. Can you be more honest with me is not a concrete request. I'm a language person. More honest with me, judgment in there, as well as an abstract request. Yes. So what do you mean more honest? Does that mean I'm being dishonest? And what is the concrete action that this person is asking for? So in nonviolent communication, again, when we express our need or we make this request, we have to be really cognizant that we're not couching it in all of these judgmenty types of language or being too obscure and abstract. When we ask for what we need, ask, not demand, we have to have concrete things. So what does more honest actually look like? What does more responsible look like? What does show more respect for my privacy look like? For example, can you ask me to borrow a pen from my desk if you need one? Can you, whatever the concrete action is. When I am on the phone with clients, can you not, can you wait to ask me a question, whatever the case may be. And so again, just being really cognizant of how we express ourselves in this space can create more conflict, can shut down relationships, can create adversarial moments or oppression, depending on who's in the conflict space, versus opening up the space and navigating that conflict with grace. It's an opportunity for poise. It's an opportunity for, empathy and learning and growth. So this is where I'm going to sort of put us on pause here right now with about 15 minutes left in our space together. I'd like you to imagine that we are in a conflict with a peer, perhaps a colleague, a fellow teacher, or if you're a manager or a supervisor, somebody who is a peer, not a supervisor or not somebody who is quote unquote under you. I'd like you to imagine that this is the conflict. And by the way, this would be the observable behavior. This is the description of the behavior. You sent me 6 texts after work-related texts after 4 p.m. yesterday and 12 texts over the weekend. So if this is our objective, non-judgmental, observable behavior, let's imagine, friends, what might the feeling be that we would want to express to our colleague, our peer? How are you feeling? Your colleague, I am feeling overwhelmed. Sure, I'll actually take that as a feeling. It's a mixed feeling, Melissa, but I will take that as a feeling. Good. What other kinds of feelings? I'm worried. All right. That is a legitimate feeling. I am feeling frustrated. I'm tired. Frustrated, anxious. I'm feeling anxious, panicky. That's a great feel. I'm confused. Sure, absolutely. Confusion is a feeling. Absolutely. Angry. Absolutely. Perhaps worried. Yeah. Neil says, I want to say, I feel like you're not respecting my boundaries. Yes, Neil, it's a trap. I need to get my Star Wars meme out. I feel stressed. Absolutely. I feel, now careful. Ooh, pressure. Dun, 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 dun. Pressure. It's not a feeling. Overwhelmed is a feeling. Cornered, careful. Cornered, not a feeling. I feel like you're I feel like you're a jerk. Adam, are you in the right workshop? Okay, sorry. Okay. Guilty. Do I have it right? Threatened. Careful, Eileen. Threatened, not a feeling. Threatened is an interpretation of the behavior. I would go with worried. I would go with worried. Pressured, not quite a feeling. You're pressuring me. Oh, that's an interpretation of the behavior. See how hard this is, friends. All right, I feel frustrated. I'll take that one. I feel worried. Absolutely. I feel tired. I feel frustrated. All of these are good. Let's see here. I feel like you're a colossal jerk. Leave me alone is what I would want to say because I'm reactive. But if I want to practice nonviolent communication, yeah, Ava, I feel worried. Be careful, not worried about you. This is the thing. You want to be careful. Like, I'm not worried about you. Maybe you're worried yourself. I feel worried that I have to answer you. I don't know, something like this. So there's a lot of ways you could express your feeling. I feel uncertain. Sure, like uncertain or concerns is okay. Or I feel worried. Absolutely. I feel anxious is a good one because maybe we could connect that to our need because like I feel anxious because I feel like, and this is the fun part with needs and desires, like I feel anxious because I want to respond, because I want to be helpful, because I want to be I want to be seen, I don't know, whatever the need is, right? There's a lot of different ways of expressing your need, right? So when a colleague emails or texts me over the weekend, I feel pressured. I do, even though that's not a feeling. But why? Because I want to, here's my need. I desire to be perceived as helpful. I desire to be perceived as collegial, right? That is one of my needs and desires, right? I desire to be to be competent and helpful and all of these things. There's a lot that I need and desire, which is probably why I'm feeling anxious. It depends on the text or about, let's just say work-related texts. Yeah, for sure. Let's assume here, Robin, that these are not like hostile, I hate you and I'm going to come like burn your house down type of texts. Because remember, if the texts are already at that level of aggression, nonviolent communication is not the strategy that we're going for here. It's not a de-escalation communication strategy. If you're already receiving actual threats like offensive or aggressive texts, nonviolent communication might not be the strategy that you want to use in this particular case. And I say might, right? Or you could be just interpreting the text as hostile because texts are without context and tone. Yeah, for sure. I would feel anxious. Yeah, for sure. So like, I feel anxious because like, I want to be helpful. I desire to be helpful to you, but when I receive texts on the weekend, I'm worried, I'm anxious that if I don't respond to you, our relationship is going to suffer or all of this. And what do we need, right? Here's another need. I need to be able to disconnect from work over the weekend, right? I feel anxious because I want to be helpful to you, but I also need to take a break from work over the weekend. I need to unplug. Yeah, I need me time, right? My own time and space. Good. What's the request, my friends? What is the request we could ask our colleague who is sending us work-related emails over the weekend? Go away. Leave me alone. Stop being... Neil, can we meet on Monday? Yeah, for sure. Can we meet on Monday at 9? Can you, we can schedule a meeting to talk, but then it's almost like you're deferring. You got some nerve contacting me at home. Please stop being an asshole. Yeah, can we schedule a meeting to talk? It almost sounds like you want to defer. What's the real request? Yeah, there we go. Can you, now I need you, oh, my friend, okay. I don't know about you. Can we rephrase Melissa's in a way that looks like a question instead of a demand? It's a gentle demand, Melissa. Can you contact me at weekends and absolute emergencies? Yeah, that would work, right?
Sorry, I had started typing the I need and then switched midway through.
Oh no, okay, hang on. I didn't. Oh shoot. Okay, I'm just getting so many messages coming in at once, but oh no, but yeah. I need is a very gentle demand, but sorry, and all of the messages coming in my chat box like in a flurry. Can we wait for responses for me till Monday? That's a reasonable request for sure. Sorry, there's so many in here. Kim, please continue work communication to standard work hours. That is a very polite demand. Can we refer, or it's an imperative. It's an imperative which can be construed as a command, not even a demand, but a command. Can you please only contact me about work during work hours? Yeah, just pop here. She's now you've given what you will do. Which is lovely. It's still not a request, but you've set a boundary, which is interesting. I don't check messages on the weekend. Is that okay with you? You're still setting a boundary, but it's not a request. Now you're asking permission. We're not we're not friends. See you Monday. Yeah, I know, Ava. I know. Maybe it's a work phone. Maybe it's your fault, all y'all, because you didn't turn off your work phone. I'm gonna blame you. No, everybody, see, you're funny. You're making me giggle today. Fantastic. But so I hope you can see here how easy it is to go into a command demand. Some of you went into boundary setting, but it's still not quite the same as a request. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with boundary setting. For example, I will contact you about this on Monday. Boundary setting, but not a request. So if you're practicing NVC, nonviolent communication, they're suggesting you make a request, which in a relationship brings you together over a shared understanding versus you drawing a line, right? I mean, you're still drawing a line. So 5 minutes left. Thank you, Neil. I appreciate you giving me the heads up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, folks, so that you can see my face. These are really the fundamentals, the bare bones of nonviolent communication. There's obviously a lot more, especially in terms of what if somebody else is coming to you and they're trying to communicate a problem that they're having with your behavior. How do you listen? How do you receive in a way that is still creating space for empathy, creating space for understanding, even when that other person does not know nonviolent communication and does not practice nonviolent communication, because the purpose of NVC is not to teach others or model for others how you want to do things. That is not the goal. The goal is to manage yourself. So there's a lot more to learn and to practice, but generally that's what I suggest is practicing with low stakes conflicts or high stake conflicts that are hypothetical. Don't use real life workplace conflicts because then you're just creating new conflict. I often practice using sitcoms or movies where a character or two characters are having a conflict, and we do a little role playing, a little role taking. What would this conversation look like if one of the people in that conversation was practicing nonviolent communication? My 8-year-old son says I quit. For sure. So nonviolent communication, I'm just checking the chat box here for questions. It would have to be an authentic request. Yeah, there has to be an option for this. Has to, again, it can't be a demand. It's not a demand, it's not a command, because then you're exercising power over. No bueno. You want to make it so that there is space to say no, right? And then that takes you to a different place, right? And that's a hard part of NVC too, is that you're in a space where you might have to accept no. That person might not be able to fulfill your request or may not be willing to fulfill your request.
I have a couple questions that popped up earlier in the chat. If you have a moment, Amy.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry. What's up?
Ava had asked,
It's so hard seeing all the chat. Sorry, I'm trying
no
to
problem. This has been the
monitor them all.
poppinest chat that we've ever had, I think, at Better Together. Kudos to you. Kudos to everyone. Ava has asked, what about when you frame something as an observation, but it is heard as a judgment from the receiver?
Oh, that's really hard. That's a really good question. Because a lot of people receive an observation as a judgment, right? There are strategies within NVC where you can redirect the conversation back to you can express your need. I want to have a good working relationship with you, whatever the need is. There's a whole ton of active listening strategies that you can use to try and navigate the conversation. In fact, there is an example of what I consider to be a masterclass dialogue of nonviolent communication and a high stakes dialogue included in that. But yeah, it's hard if somebody is not able to engage in the same way. Ideally, in an ideal unicorn world, everyone would have the strategies right. So what are the things that obstruct receiving the observation, right? Defense, misinterpretation, frog DNA, all of the all of the above. Lacking tools here. Going back to my very first question, what's your confidence level for engaging in conflict, right? So people not having the skill set and the confidence to navigate that for fear of getting hurt or wounded in the conflict, right? So
well, thank you very much. I'm really grateful for everything, Amy. This is a great primer, and obviously there's plenty more to do. I'm just going to stop this recording for one moment.
It's developmental. There's no such thing as a master of nonviolent communication, and I want to stress that to you, is that some conflicts are going to go over like peaches and cream. I used it recently with somebody who is a supervisor or in a supervisory type position, and it was fantastic. Relationship better than before. I've been in cases where I thought it would go super smoothly, and I crashed and burned simply because it's developmental, right? And I struggled, or I was in a place where, I couldn't get past the other person's interpretation or fear within the conflict space, right? And so that's why you'll never be a master of it. You will always be practicing it. So hang in there.